well, escalating situation. We don't know what's going on because the news flow is so constricted.
Yeah, and, we saw lots of headlines about violence yesterday, reports of 21 dead. Those haven't been confirmed, but most of that violence actually wasn't yesterday. It was just taking so long the news come out, and actually the situation has calmed down quite a bit.
Well, it would seem that way at the moment.
Yeah, it would seem that way, obviously. Yeah, there seems to be delays in getting the information out.
But this rivalry in the South China Sea has its roots a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, China claims much of the South China Sea and parts of the East China Sea, and much of it has to do with, I think what we're seeing now is a reflection of China's growing economic muscle, military muscle, and its growing confidence as it's really starting to assert these territorial claims.
I mean, they've been allies really with China leading direct investment. I mean, a lot of Chinese companies, because of their move up the value chain, can't produce as cheaply, so we had Chinese companies setting up in Vietnam where wages are lower here. But, they have a history of confrontation, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, people remember, people think of the Vietnam War and China siding with Vietnam against the U.S. But after the Vietnam War, within a few years of the end of that war, China and Vietnam fought a war and tens of thousands were killed. People don't talk about it very much. The Chinese don't like to talk about it. The Vietnamese don't like to talk about it. And there have been some violent clashes over some of these disputed territories. There's an incredible video on YouTube where you can see this Chinese gunboat gunning down a bunch of Vietnamese soldiers who are standing in kind of waist-deep water to protect one of these shoals, these reefs, and they just mow them down. So there's been tensions between the two countries. They do like to mask them because obviously the investment is so important to Vietnam's economy, but the tensions have been there.
Okay, now the thing is, who can come in and intervene here? I mean, would the U.S. intervene for one thing? 79 was a time when Vietnam was really isolated. There's much more integrated into the global political system now.
Sure, but I don't think the U.S. is looking to intervene here. I mean, look how gingerly they're dealing with the Ukraine. I don't think they certainly want any kind of conflict that they're directly involved in here. But it's of growing concern because, you mentioned earlier Japan.
I'm saying possibly even diplomatically is what we could talk about rather than militarily.
I mean, Biden, the Chinese Chief of Staff General Chief of Staff is in Washington now and came in for some rather stern words from Biden and a couple other U.S. top officials. I mean, they're very concerned about it, but China also points the finger at the U.S. saying, it's your pivot to Asia that's fueling these tensions. And they're not going to go away. I mean, China's only getting stronger, more powerful. They're really building what they're calling a blue water navy that allows them to operate much further from their ports. And this is only going to continue. China says they won't agree to any kind of international arbitration on these disputes, and they want it all done bilaterally. But there are a lot of conflicting claims here. Yeah,
I mean, it's not just, of course, Vietnam. We have, of course, conflicting claims with Japan, Korea. Indeed, also on top of that, the Philippines in the mix here as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Japan earlier changing its defense posture. They have this pacifist constitution that doesn't allow them to take military action except for purely defensive purposes. And Abe is pushing to reinterpret that to give the military a bit more leeway because they are facing one of these territorial disputes with China in the East China Sea. And they've repeatedly, hundreds of times last year, had to send up aircraft to confront Chinese planes. And their ships are always tailing each other out there. It's very tense. Yeah.